Welcome to Wolfe's World. Quiet, precise, and always a step ahead. Tell us where you're listening from. Liking and subscribing helps support the channel and the next case. Now, follow the clues. Nero Wolfe and the Silent Orchid Ledger. The knock came just after 10. Not the frantic rapping of a drunk nor the polite tap of a messenger. 3 distinct knocks, spaced like notes on a piano, deliberate and cold. I was in the front room, chair tilted back, watching the fog curl around the iron railings of 35th Street. A rain-slicked silence hovered outside, thick as the velvet on Wolfe's drapes. I rose, stepped softly, and opened the door the permitted 6 inches. Nothing casual about it. She stood there, trim coat, high collar, soaked hat clutched in white gloves. Her eyes didn't blink. They fixed on mine with a plea too composed to be ordinary panic. "Miss?" I kept my voice neutral, posture civilian. "You're late or early, depending on your intentions." "My name is Helena Forsyth," she said. "I need to speak with Mr. Wolfe." People who show up at that hour usually don't know what they need, but the name wasn't unfamiliar. Forsyth. A bookkeeping consultant for some boutique investment house uptown, I thought. A place with velvet chairs and too many initials in the stationery. "Come in," I said. "Don't drip on the mat." I stepped aside, gestured toward the red armchair in the office. Wolfe, of course, hadn't stirred. I hadn't even heard the elevator creak. If he was awake, he was pretending not to be. If he was asleep, I envied him. "Leave your coat," I added, "and whatever comes next, make it good. Wolfe doesn't rise for arithmetic." She hesitated at the chair, then sat with a precise bend at the knee. No fumbling, no rambling. This was a woman who knew how to balance a ledger and keep her lipstick even through a storm. "I work with a private firm," she began. "The Bromley Circle. Perhaps you've heard of it." I hadn't, but I nodded. She went on. "It's not large. 4 partners. 3 now. They handle investment portfolios with a focus on botanical industries, orchid nurseries, hybrid research, things like that." I leaned on the desk. "And they're cooking the books." "I believe someone is." She reached into her bag and pulled a folder, thin, grey, anonymous. Inside were 3 ledger pages, columns of numbers, all handwritten. "I've reviewed these entries for 3 weeks," she said. "Something is being rerouted. The totals match, but the inputs don't. Names are missing, codes altered." I flipped through the pages. Neat penmanship, regular spacing, the kind of tidy work that gets buried in tax court. Nothing leapt out, nothing screamed murder or mayhem. Sounds like a problem for an auditor. She gave me a look. "One of the partners is dead." "Ah. Accident?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. "He died in Peru, a plant-related research trip. That's what they told me." I nodded again, slower this time. "And now someone's rewriting history," I said. "Conveniently." She shifted. "I'm not sure what I've found, but I believe someone at the firm is laundering money." "Through orchids?" I asked. "Must be a niche market." She didn't smile. "Each client in our records corresponds to a code name based on an orchid cultivar. Paphia pedalum Roxanne, Masdevallia firetail, Crimson Tiger. There are over 200. The system was designed by the late partner." "And you think someone's tampering with it?" She nodded. "I've seen cross-outs, new cultivars that don't match any on record. Payments listed under non-existent hybrids." I tapped a finger on the folder. "Why bring this to Wolfe? We don't do tax evasion or flower fraud." "I'm not asking for a prosecution. I'm asking for clarity. I need someone to tell me I'm not losing my mind." A long silence stretched, the kind that made the radiator sound louder than it had any right to. I stood, walked to the intercom, and pressed the button. "Wolfe," I said. Static then. "Yes?" "Client. Says she's got a ledger full of orchids and fraud." "I'm retired for the evening." "She says someone's changing orchid names to hide laundered money, and one of the founders of her firm died on a research trip to Peru." A pause. "Bring her up." I winked at her. It's not always that easy. She followed me up the stairs. Wolfe was in his chair, yellow of course, hands steepled. He didn't rise, he didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. For Wolfe, that was polite interest. "Miss Forsyth," I said, "meet Nero Wolfe. He abhors being disturbed. Make it worth his while." She sat in the red chair with the kind of poise that suggested she'd researched the room before entering. Wolfe studied her with no more warmth than he gave a new catalogue from the orchid board. "I understand you're concerned about financial anomalies at your firm," he said. She nodded once. The Bromley Circle specialises in botanical assets, she began. Mostly orchids. We facilitate trade between collectors, greenhouses and academic institutions. You facilitate investment, Wolfe corrected. Yes, she said. With coded ledgers. Each client is matched with a cultivar. Each transaction is labelled as a bloom. That is absurd, Wolfe said flatly. It's also effective, she replied, until someone rewrote the garden. That got a grunt from him. Continue. She passed the folder across the desk. Wolfe didn't touch it. I did. He waited until I'd scanned enough to summarise. 3 altered codes, I said, matching 3 significant deposits. Handwriting doesn't match. There are more, she said. That's all I had time to copy. And why now? Wolfe asked. I was followed last week. I think someone knows I've noticed. That's tenuous. She looked directly at him. And tonight, I found my apartment door ajar. Nothing missing, but my ledger pages were disturbed. That's less tenuous, Wolfe muttered. He leaned back, eyes closed. Hands rested on the arms of his chair like ivory bookends. You suspect one of the partners? He asked. Yes. Why not go to the police? Because I don't have proof, only instinct. And now fear. Wolfe opened his eyes. Describe the 3 partners. She did. Arthur L. Bromley, the founder, old money and orchid obsessive. Jackie Reno, investor, charming, too smooth, always smiling. Dr. Felix March, the botanist, withdrawn, numbers man. Your suspicions? Wolfe asked. Reno, she said quickly. But March knows more than he lets on. Wolfe exhaled. You intrigue me, he said. Not because of the orchids. That, I admit, is a tawdry misuse of a noble genus. But because you chose discretion over panic. You came in the rain, with nothing but 3 pages and your nerves. She blinked. So, you'll take the case? No, he said. She froze. I will consider the matter. Mr. Goodwin will escort you home. If you are followed again, or if your door is disturbed, call the office. Not the police, not yet. She opened her mouth to argue, then didn't. She stood. Thank you. Wolfe closed his eyes again. I walked her downstairs, opened the door. The fog had thickened. Her coat vanished into it like a shadow pulling closed behind her. And that's when I noticed the orchid. On the stoop. A bloom, fresh cut, not yet wilted. A crimson tiger, left like a calling card, or a warning. I picked it up and shut the door, locking it. Wolfe wasn't going to like this. But it was too late now. We were in, whether he admitted it or not. The following morning was a study in Wolfe's routine. Breakfast had been served, as ever, at 9. He took his soft-boiled eggs, toasted rye and a bitter Assam blend, barely glancing at the Gazette. I'd made the mistake of asking whether orchids could be used for anything other than decoration. The raised eyebrow I received in return could have soured cream. At 11, we reconvened in the office. The rain from last night had soaked the city to the bone. Fog had lifted, but the sky still hung heavy with wool-grey clouds. Miss Forsyth sat again in the red chair. This time she brought with her a larger folder, edges worn, corners bent. It bore no label. She placed it gently on Wolfe's desk, then clasped her hands in her lap, as if awaiting a verdict. These are the full records? I asked. She nodded. The orchid ledger, the one I've been reconciling for 6 months. Wolfe gave it a sidelong glance, but didn't touch it. I presume the codes are intact, he said. She opened the folder. Dozens of handwritten sheets lay within, each with columns labelled bloom, root, shade and pot. Below them, entries like Phalaenopsis wisteria, 1/200, 4%, Albany, and Masdevallia argentum, 950, 3.5%, Newark. It's a ledger disguised as a botanical catalogue, she explained. The client is the cultivar. The amount invested is the value assigned. Shade is the commission percentage. And pot. Geography, where the money's seeded. Wolfe grunted. A cipher built on metaphor. Helena leaned forward slightly. It worked for years. Mr. Bromley, Arthur Bromley, designed it. He said it kept prying eyes out. If you didn't know the root structure, it all looked like flower talk. Until someone repotted the blooms, I muttered. She turned to me. The 3 entries I gave you last night, they're not even real orchids. Someone made up cultivars and tied large transfers to them. And the partners? Wolfe asked. They meet every Monday, she replied. Reno handles the numbers, but he's not good at details. Felix March maintains the botanical front. Bromley, what's left of him, is in and out. Mostly stays in the greenhouse. I tilted my head. And you're sure one of them's dirty? I'm sure someone is. The numbers don't lie. And one of those entries matches a transfer from a Panamanian fund we're not supposed to touch. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You're not supposed to touch? She hesitated. Mr. Bromley was strict about our ethical limits. No offshore money, no foreign laundering. He was obsessed with keeping the circle clean. It was his legacy. And now he's dead, I said. She nodded. In Peru, she added softly. The autopsy said heart failure, but no one here ever saw a body. Convenient, Wolfe murmured. Helena reached into the folder again and pulled out a smaller envelope. It was addressed to E.C. Brigham, Esquire in Boston. On the back, the wax seal had been torn. Inside, a brief letter, unsigned. It was in Bromley's top drawer. I don't think I was meant to find it. Wolfe didn't move. I took the letter and read aloud. To whom it may concern, if the orchids bloom beyond reason, follow the crimson tiger. He is not what he pretends to be. That's it? Wolfe asked. Yes, she said. There's no crimson tiger in the orchid world, but last week I found it listed on page 17 with a $10,000 transfer. To where? Vireo Holding Group, she answered. A shell company registered in Delaware. That was enough to earn Wolfe's gaze. He sat forward. And no other employees know? She shook her head. I haven't told anyone. He tapped the arm of his chair. Then you are in danger. I saw her composure falter then, just a flicker. The right corner of her lip trembled, though her posture didn't change. I know, she said. Wolfe exhaled. I don't take well to covert accounting, but there is something in your tone that convinces me this ledger may be worth more than the sum of its orchids. He looked to me. Tonight, the office. Mr. Goodwin will examine it. She nodded. There's a spare key in the vestibule box. I'll leave the front lobby door unlatched at 7. Very well, Wolfe said. You may go. She rose, smoothed her skirt, met my eyes. Thank you, she said. Miss Forsyth, Wolfe called. She paused at the door. Do not, under any circumstance, speak of this again until we permit it. Am I clear? Yes, she said. Perfectly. She left without another word. The office felt emptier than before. Wolfe reclined. She's going to die, he said. I blinked. You don't know that. I do, he replied. Not because I hope it, but because men who design lies rarely tolerate accountants who can read. That evening, I waited until just after 7. The fog had returned. This time it didn't creep. It pressed, like the breath of a sleeping giant. The Bromley Circle occupied the second floor of an elegant but understated brownstone on East 66th. The entrance was glass, frosted, embossed with the firm's orchid sigil in pale gold leaf. I tried the vestibule. As promised, the door was open. Inside, a vestibule lamp burned weakly. Beyond it, the main office stood in darkness, save one light glowing at the rear. I stepped quietly, hand near my coat's inner pocket. You don't do this work long without a few instincts, and mine were already whispering bad things. The scent reached me first, lilacs, and something metallic underneath. The door to the rear office was ajar. One pane of glass cracked down the centre. I pushed it open, slow. She was there, Helena Forsyth, slumped in the red leather chair beneath the overhead light, her head tilted sideways, chin on her shoulder, eyes half-lidded. There was no blood, no sign of struggle, just stillness. A pause that didn't breathe, and her hand, resting on the armrest, palm up, held the stem of a flower, a crimson tiger orchid, fresh cut, no folder, no ledgers, nothing else, just the soft hum of an overhead lamp and the rain pressing against the windows. I stepped back, called the precinct from a payphone 2 blocks down, told them what I'd seen, asked for Kramer by name, didn't wait for questions. By the time I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting in the office. He was in his chair, still, silent, hands folded. She's dead, I said. He nodded, but didn't speak. They took the ledger. He closed his eyes. And left the flower, I added. He opened them. I'll take the case, he said. Wolfe was already at his desk when I returned, sipping beer from the heavy glass with an expression that would have made a metronome seem frantic. "I want dossiers," he said. "On the circle?" I asked. "Yes, each of them. Names, history, personal investments, habits. Begin with Bromley." I sat, pen out. Arthur L. Bromley, born in Syracuse, family had money and rail lines, switched to horticulture during the downturn in '29, big name in the orchid world, wrote a few essays in the Botanical Economist, funded hybridization labs in Vermont. "Married?" Wolfe asked. "Widower, no children, no known debts, keeps an estate in Mamaroneck, commutes irregularly, keeps greenhouse staff on payroll year-round." "More interested in plants than people," Wolfe muttered. "That's the impression," he gestured. "Next." Jackie Reno, given name James Rinaldi, changed it in 1933. Former broker, bounced from 2 firms in 38 and 39 for impropriety. Never charged, moved into private equity in 1940. Known for charm, has a residence on Park Avenue. No listed spouse. Heavy casino losses reported in Havana. Wolfe frowned. He gambles. Frequently. Also said to maintain connections with a Cuban export outfit called Vireo Holdings. Wolfe's fingers tapped the chair. "Vireo," he said. "That matches Miss Forsyth's ledger." "Exactly," I said. "Reno may be laundering through more than orchids." "And the third?" Dr. Felix March, degrees in botany from Columbia and Cornell, teaches part-time, hired by Bromley in 1942 as lead advisor on rare cultivars, keeps to himself, unmarried, lives modestly in the East 70s. He's the one who built the internal indexing system for the firm's orchid cipher ledger. Wolfe nodded slowly. The circle had one brain, one front, one root. I smiled. Poetic. He ignored me. "Contact them," he said, "one by one. I will not tolerate all 3 together. I want individual impressions. Arrange visits." The visits were arranged. I started with Felix March. His brownstone had a cracked entry buzzer and a smell of stale varnish. He wore a tattered cardigan, white shirt buttoned to the collar, and wire-rimmed glasses that kept slipping down his nose. His hands were pink-stained, orchid nutrient, I guessed. "She was diligent," he said, voice dry. "Too diligent, perhaps." "She thought someone was falsifying entries," I replied. He blinked. "She mentioned that?" "Only to us, not the police. She was afraid." He shook his head. "It's a shame. I tried to caution her. Said she was over-involved." "In what?" He shrugged. "The structuring." She began asking about the cipher itself, the cultivars, their meanings. Most never did that. She asked why Crimson Tiger had no corresponding bloom. "And?" I told her there wasn't one, at least not officially. "Did she press?" "She always pressed." He looked away then, toward a dead stalk in a chipped vase. "Mr. Goodwin, I am not a brave man, but I can say this plainly. Someone did not want her understanding what she found." I waited. "But I don't know who," he added quickly. "You trust Reno?" He gave a soft laugh. "I trust he enjoys money." "Bromley?" "Bromley trusts his orchids, and no one else." "Did either have access to the cipher?" He hesitated. "Reno might have. I'm not sure how, but he once referred to a cultivar by code. I never taught him that. I left him with the card. You remember something called... Will anyone be punished? He asked softly. Depends who we find with the shears in their hands. He nodded once and closed the door. Next was Bromley. His estate sat on a knoll with a view of the Hudson. Manicured, quiet. His greenhouse looked like a crystal chapel. He greeted me in a three-piece suit, fingers stained green. I won't pretend I'm not upset, he said. Helena was bright, precise, a good eye. Did you know she thought the books were being cooked? No. He led me through rows of hanging orchids. The air smelled rich, earthy, floral, with a sharp medicinal note beneath. She confided in no one, I asked. She may have. I wouldn't know. I keep to the blooms. But you're the founder. And I funded the structure. I trusted the execution to others. I stopped near a pot labelled Paphiopedilum cassis. She told us someone made up entries, cultivars that don't exist. He nodded slowly. She mentioned something once. Crimson Tiger. I dismissed it. Why? Because I invented the name. I blinked. Excuse me? I created it as a hypothetical, years ago, a name without a bloom, meant to test the indexing. It shouldn't have been in the records. Yet it was, I said. He sighed. I never assigned it. Someone else used it. Reno? I asked. He didn't answer. March? I doubt Felix would dare. I stared at him. Who else knew of Crimson Tiger? No one, he said. It was mine, entirely. I walked slowly through the glass house. Every plant had a tag. Every pot was indexed. Miss Forsyth found that entry last, I said. It was what pushed her to us. Bromley's eyes clouded. I'm not surprised. And you're not alarmed? I've been alarmed since Peru. I paused. You mean since you said you were in Peru? He turned to me, expression cold. I was there. I saw Anthony's body. You can check customs. I will, I said. He nodded toward the orchids. They don't lie. People do. He said nothing. As I left, he knelt beside a pot and began trimming a withered leaf with surgical care. The last of the trio was Reno. His office was pure midtown gloss. Oak panels, brandy in a decanter. 2 secretaries who looked bored even while typing. He smiled as I entered, hand extended. Archie Goodwin, he said. You've got a reputation. You have one too, I said. He laughed. Come on, sit. Drink? No. He poured one for himself anyway. Sat opposite me on a leather couch, ankles crossed. So, what's this about Helena? She was found dead. Yes, tragic. You seem untouched. He shrugged. We weren't close. She believed someone was falsifying the Orchid ledger. He sipped. And you think it was me? She thought so. Well, she was wrong. I didn't even see the ledger. That's odd. We heard you reference one of the internal codes. He leaned forward slightly. Listen, I don't need a cipher. I don't care what they call things. I bring in capital. I keep the doors open. You also keep company with Vireo Holdings. He froze, briefly. That's public record, he said. We use them for logistics. Through Panama? He didn't answer. I stood. You're nervous. I'm insulted. You're both, I said. At the door I turned. Helena left a flower in her hand. Crimson Tiger. Fresh cut. He blinked once, then smiled. Never heard of it. Odd. You'll be hearing more. I left before he could ask what I meant. Back at the brownstone I found Wolfe finishing lunch. Cornish hen, scalloped potatoes, a sigh of satisfaction. Well, he asked. March is scared. Bromley is hiding something. Reno is lying. And the ledger? Still missing. He nodded. Then the circle is broken, and one of them did the breaking. The orchid world is a peculiar jungle. Not the kind where you sweat through your collar and worry about pythons, but one where reputations grow in hot boxes and die from drafts. Wolfe calls it the only place more political than City Hall, and he's not wrong. You wouldn't think a flower could spark jealousy, fraud, and 5-figure bids from a widow in silk gloves, but it can. Which is why I found myself that Thursday evening elbowing through Manhattan's Botanical Society gala, a snifter of sherry in one hand, and a counterfeit orchid pin on my lapel. Arthur Bromley was hosting. The main floor of the Lexington Hall smelled like waxed wood, warm wine, and blossoms in heat. Velvet ropes marked off greenhouse displays like crime scenes. Gas lamps in the corners flickered behind frosted glass. Men in tuxedos adjusted cufflinks. Women in silk moved like water in high heels. Bromley's name was everywhere, etched in brass on placards, murmured behind gloves. His display sat center floor under a circular skylight. The orchids were arranged like a coronation. Rare hybrids, reds, silvers, speckled greens, all indexed, tagged, and hovering in shallow pots above moss trays. And one placard caught my eye. C. Tigeriensis brava, S. 1946. Panama lineage, not for sale. I didn't need a botanist to tell me. Crimson Tiger, the name Helena mentioned, the one that shouldn't exist, the one tied to money, dirty or otherwise. It wasn't hypothetical anymore. The flower matched its name, streaked red veins through waxy petals, center curled like a tongue in a hiss. I'd seen orchids before, but this one practically growled. Then came the voice beside me. You're not a collector. I turned. Felix March. He wore a cream cravat and spectacles slightly fogged from the room's humidity. His hands were tucked behind his back, eyes twitching between me and the flower. "I dabble," I said. "This one's striking." "It's mislabeled," he replied quickly. "That's not the crimson tiger." "Oh?" I said. "Looks like a tiger. Feels like a tiger." He adjusted his glasses. "It's an old nursery joke. The name isn't recognised." I leaned in. "Then why is it on Bromley's pedestal with a Panama note?" His silence was sharp. "You're not listed on the event registry, Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Neither was Helena," I answered, "but she had something to say." He took a half step back, bumping a fern. "Excuse me," he said, and turned into the crowd. I watched him vanish through a pair of French doors. His pace wasn't fast, but it wasn't aimless either. I turned back to the flower, then scanned the base of the pot. Beneath the nameplate, etched into the brass, was a series of tiny numerals, 8817 B4 TL. I jotted them in my notebook. Brass etching wasn't casual. It was permanent, expensive, purposeful. Wolfe had a word for moments like this. Implication. I made my way to the reception table. A young woman with a clipboard looked up. "May I help you?" "C. tigeriensis brava," I said. "That hybrid. Is there a catalogue number?" She flipped through a booklet. "No entry," she said. "Some hybrids are private. Donors submit them for display without registration." "And that one came from Bromley?" "Yes," she said. "His greenhouse in Mamaroneck." I thanked her and stepped outside. The air was cleaner. No perfume, just concrete and night. A cab took me to the brownstone. Inside, Fritz was plating Wolfe's late supper, trout almondine with cream spinach. I waited until the fork clinked against the plate before speaking. "Crimson tiger's not a metaphor anymore," I said. "It's blooming on Lexington Avenue." Wolfe looked up. "You saw it?" "Yes. Panama lineage. Not for sale. Brass etching reads 8827 B4 VTL. He put down his fork. "Describe it." "Waxy red veins, tiger pattern. Looked like it wanted to bite me." He closed his eyes. "That name was never registered. I checked the Orchid indices yesterday." "So who created it?" "Someone who wanted it hidden in plain sight." I sat across from him. Felix March panicked when I noticed it. "He should," Wolfe said. "He said it was mislabeled." "Lies are the fertilizer of guilt." He reached for a notepad and scribbled, 8817, likely a code. B4 may refer to bed position in the greenhouse. And VTL? Possibly Vireo trading line. I nodded. VTL, Vireo, it fits. Wolfe drummed his fingers. The flower is real, but it's the tag that matters. I leaned forward. "You think the ledger wasn't just financial?" "I think it was communicative," he said. "A system for signals, payments perhaps, locations, instructions." He paused. "Tell me, were there others labelled like that?" "Most were standard. One or two had odd suffixes, but only that one had Panama lineage." He stood, a rare thing. "Get me photos of the display, the flowers, the placards." "I can try," he waved. "Try as for amateurs. Acquire them." That night, I returned. The gala was closed, but the cleaners were inside. I slipped through the side hall, past linen carts and perfume ghosts. The crimson tiger was gone. Only the pot remained, empty, damp and cold. No tag, no brass, no proof. Back at the brownstone, I laid the notebook on Wolfe's desk. He stared at the sketch of the tag I'd made, then folded his hands. "It wasn't a message," he said. "It wasn't? It was the message." He looked at me. "They don't need the ledger anymore. The flowers carry the code. Each name, each hybrid. If one knows the cipher, the trade is silent, elegant and untraceable." Helena knew it. He nodded. She knew which flower held which name. "She was the translator," I said. "And now she's gone." I exhaled. "So what now?" He leaned back. "We break the circle by following the petals." It started with Fritz. That morning, just past 11, he entered the office with a tray of pastries and a face like a misplaced decimal. He placed the plate down on the sideboard, then turned, hands folded with precision, as though the news were best served with restraint. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "there is a bloom in the South Orchid room that does not belong." Wolfe, who was deep in a monograph on Mexican oncidiums, lifted his eyes without lifting his head. Fritz, the south room is yours. Fritz nodded. Indeed, which is why I know each bloom by colour, scent, and placement. This one was not there yesterday. Wolf's brow creased. Describe it. Crimson and white with dark veining across the lower lip. Hybrid pattern. The stem was clipped recently, and there is something else. He stepped forward and produced a folded linen square. Inside, a single bloom. Wolf did not reach for it. I did. I lifted it gently by the stem, holding it under the light. The petals were curled inwards, still plump with moisture. The colouring was vivid, too vivid. A false red, the sort that came from artificial propagation. And near the edge, barely visible, a brown smear, half-dried. I turned it slowly. The smear ran down the stem, darker in the middle. It wasn't sap. It's blood, I said. Wolf inhaled deeply. Yours? I asked Fritz. No, sir. Mine? I asked. Impossible, he said. I nodded. Then it came from outside. Wolf closed the book in front of him. Who delivered anything yesterday? No one. The front door never rang, no parcels arrived, no guests. And you inspected the south room? After the midday airing, Fritz said. It was clean. Then the flower was placed there sometime between 3 and 10. I glanced at Wolf. You think someone came in? Not through the front, he said, and not while Fritz was present. The implication hung between us. Someone had access or assistance. Where did you find it? Wolf asked. In the back row, among the unnamed hybrids. I stood. I'll check the windows. The south room smelled like every orchid in bloom. Earthy, floral, faintly spicy. I moved slowly, checking each pane. Nothing broken. The latch on the rear window was loose, though, just enough to slide it open without a rattle. Someone had been here. I returned with the bloom, laid it on Wolf's blotter. It was placed deliberately, I said. He nodded. And it doesn't match any in my collection. Which means it came from one of theirs. He didn't reply. I added, Felix would know better than to plant a clue here. March is too timid. Bromley is too proud. Reno, Wolf said softly. I nodded. The only one bold enough to enter the lion's den. And stupid enough to think we wouldn't notice, Wolf replied. I sat. I'll visit his townhouse. He waved a hand. Take gloves, take care. I left by noon. Jackie Reno's townhouse stood on a pristine block near Sutton Place. Ivy up the front. Brass mail slot. 3 stories and a private entrance with a lion's head knocker. I didn't use it. Instead, I circled to the rear alley where deliveries were made. The service entrance was unlatched. Not open, just loose. Inside, the place smelled like citrus wax and expensive cologne. No footsteps, no staff. Reno's taste was flamboyant. Ivory panelling, cut-glass sconces, a pair of bronze panthers flanking the fireplace. I moved upstairs, slow. The guest rooms were arranged in a row. Most were unused. Dust in the corners, empty wardrobes. But the third door, to the left, had a light on. I entered quietly. Standard layout, vanity, writing desk, no personal effects, and a bathroom door ajar. I crossed the rug and pushed it open. The tiles were black and cream, polished to a shine. On the floor, near the far edge of the bath mat, was a single mark, a faint heel print, partial. But enough. I crouched. Small size, high arch, heel slightly chipped on the edge. It matched Helena's shoes. I knew because I'd seen her in them. Twice. Italian leather, burgundy with gold lining, the kind you notice. She'd been here, hours before her death, maybe minutes. I stood and looked around. Nothing else obvious. No blood, no sign of struggle. Just a faint scent. Perfume. Not powdery, floral. Jasmine base. Not the scent of Reno's usual companions. Helena had worn it in Wolf's office. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. On the desk, tucked beneath a blotter, was a note. Torn. Just the corner. I didn't touch it, but the print matched Wolf's high-grade bond stock, likely from the stationery she'd used to draft the first message. She'd come here with intent, and left without the ledger, or hadn't left. I departed without leaving prints. Gloves helped. So did habit. Back at the brownstone, I placed the heel sketch and scent note in front of Wolf. She was there. He examined the sketch. This confirms it. She wasn't a guest. She didn't check in. She snuck in or was invited off record. He leaned back. Describe the print. Partial heel, burgundy dye along the tile edge. Same pattern she wore the day she visited. He nodded. Anything else? Her perfume, I said, still in the air. And Reno? Absent, but he didn't clean it up. Why not? He didn't think we'd look. Wolfe turned toward the Orchid. That hybrid. Where would he get it? Custom order, likely overseas, he sighed. It's not a clue, he said. It's a signature. He wanted us to know she was there. Or someone else did, Wolfe murmured. A warning? A message. We saw the Crimson Tiger, now we see where it slept. Do you believe she died there? He closed his eyes. No, she died elsewhere. But she learned something in that house. I paced. He's hiding something. They all are, Wolfe said. I stopped. This changes the sequence, he nodded. She went to Reno, confronted him, or he lured her. Then the ledger vanished. And so did she. We were silent for a moment. Wolfe tapped a finger. Tomorrow, we invite them again, one by one. All three. In order. March, Bromley, Reno. And what do we ask? Nothing, Wolfe said. We let them talk. And if they don't? We watch what they don't say. I rose. Then I'll prep the chairs. He looked up and moved the red one closer. The sound that came from the vestibule wasn't a knock. It was a bang, followed by a mutter, the creak of Fritz's disapproval, and the unmistakable bark of Inspector Kramer. I'd left the front door open on purpose. He didn't appreciate it. Don't get cute, Goodwin, he said as he pushed into the office. This isn't a social call. Wolfe remained in his chair, fingers laced over his girth, gaze somewhere just below contempt. Kramer tossed his fedora onto the red armchair and took the other without waiting to be asked. Let's not waste each other's time, he said. I never do, Wolfe replied. Kramer reached into his coat and produced a folder, manila, creased, stained with what looked like cigar ash. He opened it. You've been whispering in the wrong ears, he said. We're calling Helena Forsyth's death a break-in gone wrong. Wolfe's brow lifted an inch. A break-in that stole nothing, he said, left no signs of entry, and included a carefully placed flower in the victim's hand. Kramer's jaw shifted. We found fingerprints. Wolfe sniffed. On what? Her coat, right shoulder, partial, matched to a man named Emery Bell. Who is he? Valet, Kramer said. Works for Arthur Bromley. Ah, Wolfe murmured. The valet. He has a record, minor. Attempted theft in 38. Pleaded down. We picked him up last night. He says he helped Helena into her coat once. Nothing more. And you believe him? Kramer didn't answer. Wolfe leaned forward a fraction. You're here because you don't. I'm here because your name came up twice in 2 days, Kramer said. And I don't like surprises. Nor do I, Wolfe replied. Yet I've had several. Kramer slapped the folder shut. She was scared, I said. You know it. We told you she came here. She brought pages from a ledger that no longer exists. Kramer glared at me. She also broke into her own office, he said. We found signs of tampering. Filing drawers forced. Her key was missing. She left that key for me, I said. Kramer's silence admitted it. Wolfe cleared his throat. Inspector, you've brought a valet and a dead girl. I suggest you now bring the garden. Kramer squinted. The what? The greenhouse, Wolfe said. Bromley's, to be precise. I require employment records, visitor logs, and transport manifests from the past 6 months. Kramer scoffed. Why? Because someone used his facilities for more than orchids, and Helena knew it. Kramer shifted in his chair. You're guessing. I'm reasoning, Wolfe replied. There's no difference, I added, except Wolfe charges more. Kramer stood. This is thin. This is necessary, Wolfe said. Kramer rubbed his brow. If I subpoena records and you're wrong, I won't be, Wolfe said. Kramer stared at him. Bell's not the killer. No, Wolfe replied. He's the distraction. Kramer grabbed his hat and walked to the door. There, he paused. I'll get you the logs. Wolfe didn't move. Good, he said. Kramer turned the knob. And Wolfe? Yes? If this leads nowhere, I'm bringing you in for obstruction. Wolfe closed his eyes. I should be so lucky. It arrived in the noon post, wrapped in butcher paper and bound with twine. No return address, no wax seal, just a white tag clipped to the twine with a brass paperclip. To Mr. Nero Wolfe, private office. Fritz brought it in on the same tray as Wolfe's beer and pickled eggs. He said nothing, but his eyes were narrowed. Wolfe didn't acknowledge the tray. He gestured toward the package. "Archie," he said. I opened it slowly. Inside, a torn ledger. Familiar paper. Ink faded from folding. The first few pages were blank. Then came a sequence of entries, handwritten in Helena's style. I laid the pages out flat across the desk. Wolfe leaned in, chin tucked, eyes sharpened to pinpoints. "Describe them," he said. "There are 6 entries, each marked with a cultivar." I read aloud. Masdevallia aurum, $2,200. Axis Trust, 0603 Paphia pedulum ignis, $3,000. Vireo Holdings, 0612 Bulbophyllum raptor, $100. L. Marchant Group, 0615. I paused. "And this," I added, scrawled in pencil beneath the last line. I turned the sheet. "Crimson Tiger, 8 p.m, Vireo Club." Wolfe didn't speak. He reached for the magnifier and held it above the penciled words. "The hand is hers," he said, "but the pencil differs from the others. A newer mark, more pressure." I nodded. She added it later. "Under stress," he murmured. "Perhaps haste." I stepped back. "The Vireo Club's on 39th, I said. "Private, members only, Cuban affiliation. Reno's name is on the donor wall." Wolfe tapped the paper. She had decoded something, or intercepted a message. That time, 8 p.m, is specific. "A meeting?" I asked. "Or a transaction?" he said. "Either way, it is fixed. Tonight." I lifted the sheet again. "She died the same night she wrote this," he nodded, "which makes it the key." I folded the pages and slipped them into my coat. "I'll go." Wolfe looked toward the window. "Take the automatic," he said. "I prefer charm," I replied. "Take both," he said. That evening I dressed for shadows. Grey suit, polished shoes, hat with a narrow brim. I left the brownstone just past 7. Rain was settling in again, not heavy but persistent. It crept down collars and softened the edges of neon. The Vireo Club was housed in an old Italianate brownstone. Discreet signage, carved lion handles. The door was answered by a man who didn't smile. "Membership only," he said. "I'm not here to join," I said. "Just drink." He opened the door. The inside was all cigar smoke and soft brass. Jazz on the wireless. 4 men hunched at a poker table. A waiter in white gloves moved among them with a tray of cut limes. I took a stool near the bar and waited. The clock behind the bartender ticked towards 7:50. At 7:56, Felix March entered. Same suit, different tie, grey streaks near the collar. He nodded at no one and moved to the back room. At 8:02, Reno arrived. Linen jacket, unlit cigar in hand. He didn't pause. Followed the same path. I waited 60 seconds, then followed. The back room was dim, curtained off, and smelled of varnish. A single table, 2 men, no drinks. I stepped into the doorway. Reno saw me first. His smile was late and thin. "Goodwin," he said. "You're out of season." "I'm fond of orchids," I replied. Felix stood stiff. His hand trembled against his coat. "Sit," Reno said, "or don't." I leaned against the doorframe. "Crimson Tiger," I said. They didn't move. "It's not just a flower," I added. "It's a signature." Felix sat again, slowly. Reno exhaled. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," I said. "And more than that, so did she." "She?" "Helena," I said. "She decoded this." I held up the folded sheet. Reno paled. "That's the last page," I said. "The one that says 8 p.m, Vireo Club, Crimson Tiger." Silence. Felix's mouth opened, then closed. "You killed her," I said softly. "Or watched someone do it." Reno's voice cracked. "She was going to ruin everything." "She tried," I said. "But someone sent this." I tapped the page. "Which means someone regrets it." Felix stared at me. "I didn't touch her," he whispered. "But you knew," I said. He nodded. "Barely." "She came to me. Said she found a line, Crimson Tiger. Said she needed to warn Arthur. Then she vanished." "And you said nothing?" He looked at his hands. I thought it was over. Reno stood. "It is." I didn't move. It's not, I said. I turned and walked out. Let them stew. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe took the page from my hand, studied the graphite lines. 3 cultivars tied to financial institutions, he said. All recent, all concealed, and 1 final note. Timing is deliberate, I said. He nodded. It wasn't a ledger, it was a map. To what? To power, Wolfe said, and someone killed her to redraw the border. It was the second night in a row that I found myself leaning against the lacquered bar at the Vireo Club, nursing a bourbon I didn't particularly want. The same bartender, same band playing through the wireless, saxophone too smooth to be trusted, same velvet drapes drawn across the rear hallway. Nothing on the surface had changed, but tonight I wasn't here for ambiance. At 7:53, Felix March entered. His coat was buttoned too tight for the weather. He moved with a stiffness that didn't match the rest of the room. The man could pass for respectable in a greenhouse, but in a club like this, he wore gilt like starch. He didn't look around, just made a beeline for the corridor beyond the French doors. I waited 60 seconds, then followed. There's a rhythm to tailing someone. Too close and you make noise. Too far and you lose your man. Felix wasn't trained, but he wasn't sloppy. He moved with purpose, down the corridor, past the coat room, and into a small door marked staff only. I took a long breath and pushed the door ajar. What I saw, a man in a dark green overcoat, military cut, standing beneath a flickering pendant lamp, the kind of uniform that didn't match any branch but wanted to. His face was angular, clean shave, cold eyes, a satchel hung at his side. Felix handed him another, shorter than a briefcase, long enough for documents, or bonds, or ledgers. The man took it without a word, tucked it into his coat. Then he turned. Our eyes met. For a second everything froze, then he moved, and fast. Through a side door up a narrow flight of stairs, I gave chase. The hallway was lined with storage bins and cleaning supplies. The air smelled like cedar oil and damp cloth. At the top of the stairs he turned left. I followed. He hit the rear exit. By the time I reached it, he was gone. A trail of wet boot prints led toward the alley, but nothing more. I turned back, retraced my steps, re-entered through the staff door. Felix March was nowhere in sight. The satchel was gone, but one thing had changed. The side corridor that led back toward the main lounge now had a soft murmur, voices. I stepped forward, quietly. The drape was parted an inch. Felix stood with his back to me. Reno stood opposite, arms folded, cigarette dangling. His voice was low and sour. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "I had to," Felix replied. "He saw me." "Then it's done," Reno said. Felix hesitated. "She warned me, before she died." Reno's laugh was short. "Don't turn this into some tragedy. She played a game. She lost." Felix lowered his voice. "It wasn't a game. That ledger, she cracked it." "I don't care," Reno snapped. "It's a dead girl's trick." I froze. Felix stepped closer. "They'll come for you," he said. "They'll come for both of us," Reno replied. Then the voices stopped. I backed away before they emerged, found my way to the front, and stepped out into the rain. I didn't stop walking until I was in a cab, heading toward the brownstone. Wolfe was still at his desk. I handed him the note I'd scribbled en route, then paced the room. "The man in the uniform," I said. "Not army, not navy, civilian disguise, took the satchel and vanished." "And March?" "Delivered it, then returned to Reno." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "They used the club for the exchange." I nodded. "It was planned, precise. March was the mule." "And the satchel?" "Likely the other half of the ledger." He sighed. "Gone again." I stopped. "But they said something else, about Helena. Reno called the ledger a trick, a dead girl's trick." "Which it was," Wolfe said. "And still is." He looked up. "March is deeper than he claimed." "No doubt." "Then tomorrow," he said, "we pull him apart." Wolfe had not left his chair in 3 hours. The room was dim, save for the desk lamp and the glow of dusk behind the drapes. The heat clicked softly in the pipes. Fritz had brought in coffee, not beer. Something told me we weren't to interrupt. I sat across from him, pen in hand, notebook open. The torn ledger pages lay spread across the blotter in careful order. No creases, no fingerprints. Wolfe's magnifier rested between his fingers. "You'll speak when I tell you," he said. "Not before." "Understood." He closed his eyes. Masdevallia aurum, he began, Latin for gold, a cultivar not officially catalogued before 1947. Yet here, he tapped the page, listed under Axis Trust June 3rd for $200. Gold-backed currency, I asked. Possibly, but more likely war surplus. Axis Trust was flagged in 46 for importing industrial solvents under diplomatic cover. Their only known domestic contact was a broker in Albany. That broker died last year. He flipped the page. Paphiopedilum ignis, he said, the fire slipper, registered in Ecuador, 1948. But here, attached to Vireo Holdings, dated the 12th. He paused. Ignis is not just a flower, it's a coded cue. I leaned forward. For what? Combustion, fuel, or weaponry. He adjusted his posture. Felix March didn't invent these names, he understood them, but the system was not his. He inherited it. Wolfe reached for his notes. Bulbophyllum raptor, he read. Unregistered. Name implies predation, or more simply, illicit trade. And the fourth, I prompted. He turned the page slowly. Crimson tiger, he said. The name hovered in the air. It's not a cultivar, he added. It never was. It's a vessel, an empty category, created to float transactions no one wished to claim. A shell, he nodded. Bromley created it as a test. And someone adopted it. Wolfe's voice dropped. Yes. He turned toward the orchid on the stand near the drapes. Crimson, veined, silent. Helena understood the code, he said. She mapped the cultivars to movement. Goods, money, aliases. She saw patterns where others saw petals. She died for it. Wolfe didn't reply. I stood, walked slowly toward the orchid stand. The bloom we'd recovered, the one planted in the south room, still sat in a glass dome. Its colour had darkened at the tips, age, or something else. She was supposed to be frightened, Wolfe said. I turned. Not killed. He shook his head. She was the decoder. No one intended to silence her permanently. They needed her to stay silent, long enough for the next drop, the next delivery, the next crimson tiger. But something went wrong. She recognized a name. Wolfe stood, a rare sight. His hand rested on the back of the yellow chair. He stared at the ledger. She saw one name that didn't belong, a client name, perhaps a diplomat, a wartime procurement officer, someone high, someone that made the rest of it too big. I moved to the desk. She threatened to go public? No, Wolfe said. She intended to warn Bromley. Did she? She tried. He paused. But she told March first. And March told Reno. Precisely. I looked down at the paper again. Each orchid was a signal, not just a name, not just a code, a transfer, a contact, a warning. She left us this, I said. This half. Wolfe nodded. The other half holds the key. To what? To who? Fritz entered quietly then, as if summoned by tension alone. He placed a silver tray with a fresh envelope on the desk. No return mark, he said. Courier, again. I opened it. Inside, a single square of linen. No note, just a pressed bloom. Crimson tiger. And beneath it, scrawled in thick pencil, 10 names, 2 dead, 9 to answer, HF. I passed it across the desk. Wolfe read it twice, then sat again. She catalogued them, he said, 1 for each orchid. He picked up the flower and held it to the light. She was weeks from delivering it all. She had the names, she had the system, and someone knew she wouldn't keep it quiet. I nodded. So they pushed her. And she broke. No, Wolfe said. She bent. Then she left us the pieces. I looked at him. What now? He placed the bloom in his book, closed it gently. Now, he said, we list the 10. The rain had stopped by morning, but the fog remained, draped over the city like a wool shroud, the kind that blurred outlines and softened footsteps and made people careless. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, second tier. I'd been told not to interrupt, but the name on the label I found didn't leave room for protocol. I waited outside the glass doors, listening to the faint hiss of the misting system and the click of Wolfe's pruning shears. After 5 minutes I raised a hand, knocked once and waited. His voice came through the humidity like it always did. stern and muffled. Yes? I opened the door slowly and stepped into the orchid-laden warmth. He didn't look up. I said I was not to be disturbed. Then punish me later, I said. But I think you'll want this. He turned his head, just slightly. I held up the label between two fingers. Laminated card, handwritten in faded black ink. The corner was torn and the string had snapped, but the inscription was clear. Orchid 17A, no record. Arrival, March 1946. Wolfe stepped closer. He took the label, held it under the grow lamp and squinted. Where? Bottom drawer of the cabinet, I said, mixed in with old growth notes. He traced the lettering with his thumb. This is Helena's hand. I nodded. And it's not in the ledger. No. He stared at the label again. She annotated it, labelled it, and then omitted it. Or someone removed it. Wolfe closed his eyes. Orchid 17A, he said slowly. Unregistered, unnumbered, and untraceable. And from 1946, I added. Imported the same year the Bromley Circle's Peruvian shipment went missing for 3 weeks. He looked at me. You remember that? I checked the import logs. Bromley claimed the crates were held in port. Customs had no record. He exhaled slowly. Continue. I handed him a second slip of paper. Spoke with Ortega this morning, one of your hybrid suppliers. He says a Jack Reno arranged a direct shipment from Callao in 46. No paperwork. Cash transfer. 7 pots marked experimental cultivar. One was deep red with tiger striping. Wolfe's jaw shifted. She traced it, he said. Down to the date, the entry point, and the money used. And someone removed it from the ledger. Exactly, I said. He turned toward the wall. Show me the flower. We stepped together into the south enclosure. Fritz had already moved it forward, beneath the western pane. Orchid 17A sat in its clay pot, surrounded by lesser blooms like a queen among pawns. The petals were longer than most slipper orchids. The lip curled forward like a tongue. The red veins had darkened with time. Beneath the stem, a small crack in the soil suggested transplanting. Recent. She tagged it before she died, Wolfe said, or someone wanted it hidden. Until it wasn't. I watched him lean close, not touching, just hovering. There's a Peruvian hybrid registry, he said. Felix March kept a copy in the greenhouse. Already checked it, I said. No match. So, Wolfe said, a flower without a name, but not without a signature. Reno, he straightened. She discovered he was moving illegal stock, exotic hybrids unregulated by post-war trade bans. Orchid smuggling wasn't the point, it was the cover. Drugs, I asked. Not at first. Documents, currency, identity transfers, then narcotics possibly later. And Orchid 17A? The first, Wolfe said, the pilot, the dry run. He moved to his desk, sat heavily and placed the label beside the crimson bloom from earlier. She must have known, perhaps not the full chain, but enough. Why leave the label? Because she knew someone would find it. I paused. Why not destroy it? Because she still had hope. Hope for what? He closed his eyes. That someone would finish what she began. I looked down at the label again. The ink at the top had smudged, not from water, but from heat. A faint scent of oil remained. I reached for the ledger. She matched it to a number. Yes, Wolfe said, but which one? I turned the page to the very back. Helena had written 3 small marks along the bottom corner. 17A, Mariposa 17B, Iguazu 17C. Only one has no name, I said. Wolfe nodded. She stopped short. I frowned. Or someone stopped her. He tapped the label. This flower, 17A, was the missing name. The link between the shipment and the man. Jackie Reno. Yes, Wolfe said. Do we have proof? We have enough. I stepped away. What now? Wolfe looked at me. We bring him in. It began with a sneeze. A loud, involuntary explosion from Fritz, echoing from the office doorway like a pistol shot through damask. He stood frozen, handkerchief to his nose, eyes watering. In his other hand, held delicately by the spine, was the partial orchid ledger, the one Helena had left behind. Wolfe looked up from the footstool. That, he said, is inconvenient. Fritz nodded, recovered, and placed the ledger on the desk, away from the blotter. "I apologize," he said. "The pages smell acrid, not mold, something else." Wolfe tilted his head. "Aromatic?" Fritz considered. "Sharp, almost bitter, like quinine or dried lilies." Wolfe motioned for me. I moved around the desk and opened the cover. Pages fluttered. Dust rose, not grey or yellowed with age, but off-white, with a strange shimmer under the desk lamp. Not much, just a trace, enough to make your sinuses tingle. Wolfe leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "Hold the sheet." I lifted the third page. Wolfe retrieved a letter opener from the drawer and scraped the crease between folds. A fine line of powder collected at the edge of the blade. He didn't sniff it. Wolfe never sniffed unknowns. Instead, he tapped the bell. Fritz returned 30 seconds later with a saucer and tweezers. Wolfe deposited the residue into the dish, then gestured again. "Microscope." Fritz vanished, returned swiftly with the folding brass field model Wolfe kept for orchid pollen analysis. The powder, under the lens, was fine-grained, irregularly shaped. Wolfe didn't blink. "Archie." "Yes?" "Call Dr. Trenton at Columbia. Ask for an immediate run on alkaloid composition. Send a boy." "What are we testing?" He didn't look up. "Papaverine." I paused. "Narcotic?" "Yes." "You're sure?" He nodded. "The structure, the granule shape. It's not botanical residue. It's processed, crushed, intended for concealment." I turned to Fritz. "Find a sealed pouch. We'll use the late delivery service." Wolfe finally sat back. "Papaverine is extracted from the opium poppy. It's not used in American medicine with regularity, but South America still traffics in the base compound for shipment blending." "And this ledger was laced," he said, "with just enough trace to suggest it carried more. The remainder was likely removed." "But why leave a trace?" He closed his eyes. "Because Helena opened it. She scraped that same spine. She found the dust. And knew what it meant." He nodded. "She knew the orchids were a front. For smuggling drugs." "Yes," I exhaled. "And she wrote it down. Not in the ledger. That was already compromised. But in the note, the one with the bloom, the linen tag. She left it for us." "Yes," Wolfe said. "She left the ledger because someone else didn't." I glanced at the book. They tried to erase it. "They missed a page." I stepped to the fireplace. "She must have traced the powder back to a shipment." "She did." "And Orchid, 17A?" "The same." Wolfe stood now, slowly. The chair creaked. "She understood that the orchids carried more than names. They carried weight, measurable, transferable. The flowers moved, and inside them so did this." He pointed to the saucer. "Papaverine." "And Reno?" "Owns the trade route." "March?" "Understood the science." "Bromley?" Wolfe paused, turned a blind eye, or was too old to fight. I folded my arms. "So who killed her?" He sat again. "Someone who thought she was bluffing." I frowned. "But she wasn't." "No," he said. "She never was." The bell rang. It was the courier. He took the package without comment and vanished into the rain. Wolfe looked at the clock. "We'll have results by morning." I nodded. "What do we do until then?" He lifted the orchid label from the desk. "Orchid, 17A, still crisp at the edges." "We wait," he said, "and then we burn them." The call came at 6:43, just as Fritz was lifting the cloche from Wolfe's eggs à la truffe. Wolfe paused, fork suspended mid-air. "Archie?" "Got it." I crossed to the hall, lifted the receiver. The operator's voice had a clipped urgency I didn't like. "Is this Mr. Goodwin? This is the Albany County Dispatch. There's been an incident at Bromley House. Thought you'd want to know." My voice stayed level. "Go on." "Fire. Greenhouse and attached storage. 1 casualty. A Mr. Felix March. Minor burns, smoke inhalation. Taken to St. Vincent's." "Anyone else?" "No." "Cause?" "Still under review. Fire chief said no accelerants found yet." "Thanks." I hung up and turned to Wolfe, who had resumed eating. "There was a fire," he nodded. "Bromley?" "Yes." "Felix?" "Hospital, light injuries." He placed his fork down. That's too neat. I stepped toward the door. Want me to take a look? Yes. He didn't stand. Find out what they buried. The cab ride to Albany took 2 hours. Cold drizzle misted the windows. By the time I reached the gates of Bromley House, the sky was a smudged grey smear, and the wrought iron fencing looked like a prison. The greenhouse was nothing but ribs of charred iron. Glass crunched beneath my shoes. A volunteer fireman pointed me toward the far end, where scorched floorboards rose like black teeth from the mud. Cause? Electrical, he said. That's the story. Fuse blew around 3. Anyone see Felix? Groundskeeper said he was here just after 2. No one saw him leave. You believe that? He shrugged. You don't pass out in a shed with a cigarette unless you're hiding something. I walked the perimeter. Nothing had survived the flames. No orchids, no tools, not even the ledger cabinets Wolfe remembered from his last visit. Only blackened shelves and the acrid stench of chemical ash. Then, near the rear wall, something glinted. I knelt. It was a sliver of glass, pale red. Beside it, melted metal, twisted into the remnants of a tag. One word remained, etched deep in black serif. Crimson. I brushed soot with my thumb. Below, jagged but unmistakable, tiger. Crimson tiger. One of the hybrid cultivars Wolfe had once rejected for its unstable genetics. Rare. Not commercially viable, but very good for hiding things in sealed buds. I pocketed the tag and stepped back. Felix had come to destroy. He hadn't done it alone. Wolfe was in the plant room when I returned. I waited in the front room, coat still dripping, until Fritz brought me a towel and brandy. Wolfe emerged 15 minutes later, voice calm. Well? Everything's gone. He sat. Everything? No ledgers, no jars, only the ironworks intact. Felix? Unconscious, still in care. Wolfe's hands were on the chair arms. They set the fire to erase her trail. Yes. Helena tracked the powder. She annotated the label. They knew she left notes, so they removed the source. I placed the tag on his desk. He turned it over once, twice. This wasn't from a greenhouse label, he said. No? No, too fine. This came from the shipment crate, the outer seal. So? This is what they smuggled it in. Crimson Tiger was the cover. And the drug? In the soil mix. Absorbed into the roots, or in sachets within the pot base. He tapped the tag. This tag survived because the box was opened late, likely left on a lower shelf, ignored in panic. Or Felix dropped it. Wolfe leaned back. He tried to burn the ledger, maybe to protect himself, or to obey Reno. March wasn't the type to risk a hospital trip. No, but he was desperate. Reno sent him. Yes. Why not do it himself? Because he's too exposed. I nodded. Someone torched the greenhouse, I said, but not for vengeance, not for anger, for logistics. Wolfe said nothing. It was a clean-up. Yes. What now? Wolfe reached for the phone. Now, he said, we set the bait. Which is? He lifted the tag again. This, he said. This, and Felix March's appetite for absolution. The next morning, a nurse from St. Vincent's called to say March had regained consciousness. I arrived before noon with Wolfe's note sealed in an envelope and a black and white photo of the tag clipped to the edge. He looked worse than expected, bandaged arms, sunken cheeks, yellowed eyes. Mr. March, I said. He blinked. Goodwin? Mr. Wolfe sends greetings. I handed him the envelope. He opened it with trembling fingers. His eyes scanned the words, then stopped at the photo. He exhaled sharply. So it didn't burn. Not all of it, he swallowed. Did he send you to threaten me? No, I said. He sent me to ask what Reno promised. March looked at the ceiling. He said it was too late. For what? For anything. For her. For me. He turned his face away. I never wanted to hurt her. I said nothing. I told him I'd destroy the rest. He said he'd wipe the debt. 1 trip to Bromley, 1 match. Why not burn it sooner? Because, he said, voice soft. I kept 1 page. I leaned forward. You have it? He nodded. Locker, bus terminal, 37th Street. I rose. Thank you. He didn't look up again. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe sat in his yellow chair, eyes closed, fingers tented. I placed the note on the table. Inside, folded in half, was a page torn from the Orchid ledger. Helena's handwriting. Tiny, precise. The final entry read, Crimson Tiger, shipment No. 47, soil base contains papaverine, route, Peru, Havana, Reno. Wolfe opened his eyes. So, he said, she knew the route. And she left the page. He looked toward the orchids. She left everything, he murmured, and we nearly let them burn it all. Archie opened the door to the office just as the church bell across 35th tolled the quarter hour. Fritz stood behind him, silent as a sentinel, watching the guests file in one by one. Bromley came first, grey suit, green scarf, hands like kindling in his lap. Reno followed, eyes sweeping the ceiling like he expected to find gilt hanging from the cornice. Felix March came last, walking with the cautious balance of a man who had once fallen into fire and lived to explain it. Wolfe didn't look up. He sat beneath the brass lamp, its green-glassed shade casting his face in dusky gold. The yellow leather of his chair crackled slightly as he shifted, but his eyes stayed on the page in his lap, not reading, not reacting, just letting them settle in discomfort. I shut the door behind them and took my post by the bookshelves. You will sit, Wolfe said without preamble. They did, Reno on the left red chair, Bromley on the right, Felix sinking into the middle one like it knew him. Wolfe closed the folder gently and laid it beside the inkwell. I will speak, he said. You will listen. You may interject only if I require clarification. No one moved. You, Mr. Reno, are not unfamiliar with port authorities. Reno didn't flinch, but I saw his fingers pinch the knee of his trousers. You oversaw logistics for orchid shipments to and from Casablanca and Genoa, both ports of call for narcotic routes established post-war by the remnants of the Patachi Ring. A coincidence? No. Bromley blinked. Wolfe's voice deepened slightly. Papaverine, an alkaloid, white powder, stable in temperature, soluble in ink, and, when ground and packed, easily pressed between leaves of a ledger. He opened the folder again and lifted a single sheet with tongs. Fritz sneezed, gentlemen, because your pages were hiding more than numbers. Felix turned pale. Reno didn't look over. You were laundering narcotics through the Orchid Fund, using export crates marked Crimson Tiger, a rare hybrid that coincidentally never once appeared in any conservatory records. Why? Because it didn't exist. But the label did. I reached into the drawer and laid the charred scrap on the desk blotter. Reno's jaw clenched. Miss Ternan discovered the ledger trail, Wolfe said. She traced your route backward, ink codes, shipping dates, false vouchers. That was her mistake. She believed she had uncovered corruption. She didn't realize she had walked into something larger. Wolfe's finger tapped the edge of the blotter once. A gesture that could have passed for boredom. I knew better. Felix March. You knew of it. Perhaps not from the start, but certainly once she began asking you to check freight codes. Felix opened his mouth, closed it. His tie was slightly askew, I hadn't noticed earlier. You signed off on the last ledger shipment, the one that never reached Brooklyn. You weren't laundering, you were covering. Felix's voice cracked before the words came out. I tried to burn them. Yes, Wolfe said. At Bromley House, not for your own sake, I presume. Felix shook his head, once. Wolfe leaned back. Mr. Bromley? The man startled. He'd been staring at the rug for minutes. You are guilty only of cowardice. You recognized the financial irregularities and did nothing. You suspected something in Reno's shipping practices, and you allowed it. Because the orchids bloomed and your greenhouse thrived and your conscience was trimmed as easily as a dying leaf. Bromley winced. He didn't deny it. Reno shifted in his chair. This is slander, he said finally. No, Wolfe replied. This is logic. Reno stood abruptly. You have no authority. You came here voluntarily, I said. Sit down. Reno hesitated. Wolfe didn't move. You killed Helena Ternan, he said quietly. But you did not mean to. Reno froze. You confronted her. She threatened to report you. You struck her, perhaps in panic. She fell. The wound matched a blunt corner, not a deliberate weapon. You silenced Felix by threatening the same. He attempted to destroy the ledgers. He failed. Felix bowed his head. Reno didn't speak. Wolfe's hands rested lightly on the armrests. I will deliver this to Inspector Kramer. Reno turned to me. I want a lawyer. Wolfe lifted his brow. Your timing is poetic. No one moved for several moments. The room was very quiet. Fritz opened the door. Inspector Kramer is here, he said. Wolfe didn't blink. Show him in. Kramer didn't stomp. He didn't shout. He stepped in like he already knew the weather outside and the temperature of Wolfe's office. Evening, he said flatly. Reno remained standing. Felix rose slowly. Bromley half rose, then sank back again. Wolfe gestured toward the fourth red chair. Inspector. Kramer glanced at Reno. Which one? All three, I said. Wolfe nodded once. Reno struck the blow. Miss Turner died instantly. Felix March disposed of the body. Felix shuddered but didn't deny it. And the motive? Narcotics, Orchid shipments, hidden financial trails. Kramer turned to Reno. You'll want your coat. I'll say nothing, Reno said. Kramer turned back to me. You got statements? No, Wolfe said. You have evidence. He pushed the folder across the desk. Kramer opened it slowly, scanning the first page. His lips pressed into a flat line. He flipped a second sheet, then looked up. You sure? Yes. Kramer closed the folder. Good enough for me. He turned to Reno. Let's go. Reno's face was unreadable, but I saw his hands, clenched tight, knuckles white. Felix looked at me. Will they let me explain? That's up to them, I said. Kramer motioned for the two men to move. Felix obeyed. Reno hesitated. I'll sue all of you, he muttered. No, Wolfe said, folding his hands. You'll confess, eventually. Kramer led them out. Bromley didn't move. After the door shut, Wolfe sighed. Archie, scotch. I poured. Wolfe closed his eyes and leaned back. Why didn't you press him sooner? I asked. I wanted the page. You mean the Crimson Tiger? Yes. He opened a drawer and withdrew a small sealed envelope. Inside was a second fragment of label, less burned, legible. You had it the whole time? I needed him to believe it was gone. I grinned. You're a sadist. No, Wolfe murmured. Merely precise. He sipped. Felix? Regrettably weak, but not cruel. And Bromley? Too afraid to be useful, but his silence speaks. Kramer will want you to testify. Wolfe groaned. Tell him I'm indisposed. I sat. The lamplight flickered. What made you sure it was Reno? He underestimated Helena, and he underestimated ink. I raised a brow. The ledgers, one of them smelled faintly of ammonia and lavender. Chemical ink, used to disguise opiate traces. Where'd you learn that? Read, he said simply. The clock ticked once. You think Helena guessed the whole scheme? Yes, Wolfe said, but too late. The silence stretched. Fritz entered, bearing a small tray. Tea, not sherry. She preferred chamomile, he said. Wolfe nodded. Leave it. Fritz did. We sat. 3 cups, one untouched. Outside, Manhattan hummed. Inside, the orchids bloomed. The room was still, thick with the scent of orchids and an undercurrent of tension. Wolfe was in his chair, upright, hands folded on the armrests like a magistrate about to pronounce sentence. I had taken my usual post by the red armchair just in time to see Inspector Kramer come through the door like a cold front. He didn't knock. Fritz wouldn't have opened the door, but I had been expecting the thunder. The inspector's trench coat was damp at the shoulders. His jaw worked like he was grinding gravel between his teeth. You said you had something, Kramer barked. This better not be another tea party. Wolfe lifted a brow but didn't move. Sit, Inspector. I dislike repeating myself. That earned a grunt, but Kramer obliged, throwing his coat open and lowering himself into the red chair with all the subtlety of a safe being dropped. I closed the door and stayed standing. Wolfe reached beside the desk and slid forward a thick brown envelope, sealed with a strip of crimson wax. This, Wolfe said, contains a full account. Kramer snorted. Of what? The Operation Reno Callaway has been running since 1947. Narcotics in Orchid shipments, routed through legitimate greenhouses, obscured by ledgers with innocuous titles. The most recent passed through Bromley's hands. Kramer narrowed his eyes. You serious? Wolfe inclined his head. I am. I stepped forward and handed Kramer the satchel we'd recovered. Heavy canvas stained faintly with ash at the bottom. Inside, 2 ledgers, 1 envelope of labelled stubs, and a key we'd matched to a queen's locker. Kramer flipped it open. His eyes paused on the stamped dates, the freight entries, and the neat columns of Latin flower names that meant something else entirely. He looked up. "Where'd you get these?" "Mr. Felix March," Wolfe said. "Hid them when Miss Bromley died. I imagine guilt became less tenable when someone tried to finish him off." The door behind me creaked. I turned. Felix March stood there, pale, the hospital band still tight around his wrist. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The weight in his eyes told the story. Kramer didn't rise. "You're confessing?" Felix stepped into the room and nodded once. His hands shook, but he walked past me and sat on the edge of the guest chair like a man stepping to a gallows. "I helped cover it up," he said. "I didn't know she'd—" His voice cracked. "Helena found the route. She wanted to go to the authorities. Reno told me it was under control." I heard Wolfe's breath shift behind me. Not sharp, not smug, just inevitable. "He killed her?" Kramer asked. Felix looked up. "It wasn't planned. She slipped. He pushed. It was fast. And then he told me what would happen if I didn't help." Wolfe interlaced his fingers. "And so, you helped." Felix gave no defense. "Where's Reno Calloway now?" Kramer asked, turning. Wolfe's brow lifted. "Your men should already be downstairs." And right on cue, the sound of a scuffle in the vestibule. 2 plainclothes officers shoved Reno Calloway through the front door like a man being evicted from a high-rise window. His tie was skewed, his lips split, and he was still cursing when they dragged him into the office. Wolfe didn't rise. Kramer crossed the floor like a bull let out of its pen. "I want a word, Calloway," Reno sneered. "Lawyer." "You'll get one," Kramer said, "after I get the truth." "I got nothing to say." "You will," Wolfe said mildly, "because we have your handwriting on 3 transfer slips." Reno stopped. Wolfe gestured toward the satchel. "And shipping labels from containers disguised as Orchid crates. Your name appears twice on customs documentation, signed under the alias R. Castle. Careless, Mr. Calloway." Reno blinked, the smirk dying. "That's not—" Felix cut in, voice hoarse. "I saw him sign them." Silence. Kramer stepped forward. "So that's how this plays. You smuggle heroin with greenhouse shipments? You kill the woman who finds out? You torch a building to wipe the rest?" Reno turned to Felix, eyes wild. "You're dead." Kramer moved fast. His arms snapped forward, slamming Reno into the wall. "Try that again." Wolfe's voice came like smoke through velvet. "I suggest, Inspector, that you take him now. Any further dialogue would waste breath." Kramer nodded, breathing heavy. "Get him out." The officers hauled Reno toward the door, cuffed, thrashing. "You're dead, March. You're—" The door slammed. Felix's head sank. I caught his shoulders as he swayed. "I didn't mean," he whispered. Kramer turned. "What else is in the satchel?" I passed him the final envelope. Inside, a folded manifest and a locker tag, both damp from ash but legible. Felix spoke without prompting. "Helena found that tucked in one of Bromley's folders. She told me 2 nights before the fall. I didn't think it meant anything then, but it was all real." Kramer pocketed the documents. "We'll need your statement." "I know." Felix looked at Wolfe. "Why help me?" Wolfe did not answer at once. The room for a moment was quiet as a tomb, then— "Because guilt, Mr. March, is not the same as malice, and the truth, however belated, deserves to be spoken." Felix nodded, then looked down. Fritz entered quietly, tea on the tray. Wolfe waved him off. Kramer adjusted his coat. "This'll bury 6 careers." "No doubt." "And make yours?" Wolfe shrugged. "I don't require public favor." "I'll be back," Kramer muttered. Wolfe inclined his head. "Bring a warrant next time." Kramer left. Felix remained in the chair, breathing slow. The case was closed, but guilt never really is. The door clicked shut behind Kramer. Wolfe didn't speak. He merely leaned back, fingertips pressed together like the wings of a slow, predatory bird. His eyes lingered on Felix March, then drifted toward the orchids glowing faintly in their cases across the room. "Archie," he said at last, "you may take down the statement." I crossed to my desk, opened the pad, and waited. Felix didn't object. He simply closed his eyes. Wolfe began to speak. "In the matter of Helena Bromley's death and the events surrounding it," Felix opened his mouth, but Wolfe raised a hand. "Do not interrupt. You will have your chance." Felix closed his lips. Wolfe's tone was measured, like scripture or a surgeon's dictation. He laid out each fact. The shipment logs, The orchid crates, the misfiled invoices, Helena's notations in her calendar, Felix's hiding of the satchel, and Reno's trail of sloppy aliases. He spoke without malice, without drama, only truth. By the time he finished, Felix was staring at the floor, and I had 3 pages of notes, dense as a confession and twice as damning. "You may sign this," Wolfe said. Felix didn't hesitate. He leaned forward, took the pen I offered, and signed at the bottom of the final page. His name came out shaky but clear. Wolfe said nothing more. Fritz brought in tea again. This time Wolfe took a cup. I poured one for Felix, who held it with both hands like it was the only warm thing left in the world. No one spoke for a while. The orchid room ticked softly behind glass. Outside, the Manhattan sky was starting to grey. "Will it matter?" Felix asked, eyes distant. "It already has," Wolfe said. Felix stood, paused, then extended a hand. Wolfe didn't shake it, but he did nod. That was enough. Felix left without another word. When the door clicked shut, Wolfe sighed. Deep, not tired, resigned. I folded the notes. "Another chapter?" "No," he said, "an epilogue." Then he turned his chair toward the orchids, and the case passed into memory. The office fell into stillness. Outside, horns muttered in the distance. Somewhere below, a dog barked once, the kind of mid-morning quiet that Manhattan offered only after a storm had passed. I pulled the curtains back a few inches and watched the sidewalk. Kramer's car was still there. The officers were talking. One of them lit a cigarette. Reno was gone. "Think March will hold up?" I asked. Wolfe didn't turn. He has no choice. He could still run. "He won't," I paused. "You trust him?" "I trust guilt," Wolfe said. "It is a leash more binding than chains." I didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. "Do we bill the estate?" I asked after a while. Wolfe turned his chair an inch. "No." "No?" I accepted the case. I delivered the resolution. The cost was borne elsewhere. I tapped the notepad. "You're getting soft." His eyes flicked toward me. "I'm getting old. You'll live forever." Phooey. He reached for his book. I left him there, framed in lamplight, yellow chair cradling that impossible bulk like a throne built for only one monarch in all creation. He didn't speak again. I made a note for the file, titled it Bromley, dated it, filed it. The story didn't need more. Some tales are better left with the last page unturned. The morning after the arrests, Manhattan was hushed. A thin mist hung over the pavement, softening the edges of parked cars, fire hydrants, and the occasional passing cab. The city had exhaled, and its breath still lingered. Inside the brownstone, time moved with its old patience. No doorbell, no ringing phone. The radiator ticked, and Fritz's footsteps moved quietly below. The echo of things unfinished had been filed away, quite literally, in our case cabinet. Bromley Helena inked neatly on the folder tab. I spent most of the morning at my desk, updating the logbook. The last entry was short, no dramatics, just the final pieces. Felix's confession, Reno's attempt to flee, and the shipping ledger retrieved from that locker in Union Terminal. It was enough. The rest belonged to Kramer now. At 11, I wandered down to the kitchen. Fritz had a pot of lentils simmering and was trimming thyme with the kind of quiet reverence you only give herbs or memories. "She liked the soup," he said, not looking up. I didn't ask who. He knew I knew. By noon, Wolfe rang, just once. He was already seated when I stepped into the office. Yellow chair, immovable posture, fingertips together. The sun had shifted enough to send a stripe of light across the red leather of the guest chairs, but none of them were occupied. "Join me, Archie," he said. I did. He didn't speak at once. The orchids behind him were faintly backlit, their petals seeming almost translucent. It felt more like a chapel than an office. "She had a mind," Wolfe said at last. "Not only sharp, but precise, discerning." I nodded. She was scared too, but it didn't stop her. He allowed that with a glance. "I've named it for her," he said. "The Orchid." He nodded. "Phalaenopsis helenae, a crossbred survivor, damaged early, but it endured." He turned his head slightly as if studying it from memory. "It withstood pests, temperature swings. The fungus that took 2 others did not kill it." "She'd have liked that," I said. He looked at me. "You think she would?" "I think she'd pretend not to." He almost smiled. Outside, a car passed slowly. Wolfe reached for the small wooden box on his desk. Not cigars, not brandy, but a single envelope. He slid it toward me. "What's this?" "A letter she left. I received it by courier this morning." My eyebrows rose. "Addressed to you?" "And to you." I opened it carefully. Her handwriting was precise, slanted rightward. A mathematician's hand, not a romantic one. "I trusted you because you didn't want to be trusted," it began. "Neither of you." It wasn't long, 2 paragraphs, no flourishes, but it said enough. She had known the danger. She had gone forward anyway, and she had believed, not in justice maybe, but in truth, or the barest version of it. I folded it neatly and tucked it into my breast pocket. "She didn't want memorials," I said. "Then we won't give her one," Wolfe replied. "Only a name and a silence." We sat with that. He tapped a finger on the armrest. "Kramer will not return today. Not unless someone else drops dead." "Pfui." I rose, stepped to the window. The mist had lifted a little, but the air still had weight to it. "You think Felix will hold to the story?" I asked. "He will. He's exhausted. Shame is an effective sedative." "You think that's what did him in? Shame?" "No. Cowardice, Archie. But they often resemble each other when viewed from behind." He shifted slightly. He was not evil, merely weak, but weakness enables cruelty. Same could be said for Reno. "Reno is a lizard," Wolfe said, "quick, glossy, and incapable of empathy. And yet somehow the mastermind. No, the parasite. Helena was the immune response." That was Wolfe's poetry. Cold, clipped, surgical, but not unfeeling. I looked around the office. The armchairs empty, the decanter full, the safe locked again with its soft click as if the evidence had never existed. "I'm going out for a bit," I said. "To walk?" "To remember." He nodded once and I left. The street was busier now. A child laughed. A man shouted something from a corner bodega. Life was performing its usual distractions. I walked. Not far. Just enough to hear shoes against pavement, the clatter of passing thoughts. I passed the florist on 32nd. She had tulips in the window, yellow and bruised purple. I didn't go in. Back at the brownstone, Fritz handed me a note. "She called," he said. "Who?" "Lydia Virelli." I took the slip. Her handwriting again. Smaller this time, more compact. "Thank you," it read. "I've taken the train north. I needed air." I didn't call back. The day wore on. Wolfe stayed in the plant rooms until 5. Then precisely the office bell rang again. When I entered, he was inspecting the yellowed page of a ledger from 1918, not because he needed to, but because ritual was the scaffolding of his world. "We are done," he said. "That was the last case?" He looked up. "That was the last breath of it." I didn't correct the metaphor. Fritz brought in coffee. Wolfe poured, handed me mine, and leaned back. "Did you ever understand her?" he asked. "Not fully." "Good. That means she was human." He sipped. The room felt full, even in its quiet. I thought about the orchid. I asked, "Will you catalogue it?" "Eventually." "Will you describe the markings?" He paused. "They resemble brushstrokes. Violet at the centre, fading outward." I let that sit, then said, "She would have liked that." "Then let us say no more." And we didn't. The sun drifted lower, the radiator hissed again. Outside, the mist had become nothing but air. The brownstone held its silence like a promise. Somewhere behind glass the orchid bloomed, still, unseen, quiet, but alive.